Okay, so today we're really diving deep
hmm
into Jordan Peterson's Maps of Meaning, the architecture of belief.
Okay.
You've sent over some excerpts, and
Yeah.
wow, this is really thought-provoking
hmm
stuff. It makes you kind of rethink
Yeah.
how we understand the world, like good and evil even.
Well, and what I find so fascinating is how Peterson uses these ancient myths
Right?
and even his own personal stories to kind of explain this human need for belief.
Yeah,
It's like we create these maps of meaning to navigate life.
it's true. And he starts with a pretty big personal revelation, too.
hmm
He talks about how he was initially drawn to socialism, this idea of utopia.
Right.
What clicked for you there?
Well, it's like he realized that you can't just label an entire group or ideology as simply good or bad.
Right.
It's too simplistic. It's like he's grappling with the messy reality of human nature,
Yeah.
that we all have the potential for both good and evil.
It really threw his whole world for a loop.
Yeah.
Like he even started questioning his whole career path. It's like
Mm.
that moment you realize the map you've been using
Is
is leading you in the wrong direction.
exactly. And that's when he dives headfirst into psychology and mythology,
hmm
really searching for these answers about belief. And then he shares that story about his time working in a prison
Oh, yeah.
and encountering this prisoner who on the surface seemed pretty normal.
Right.
But later he finds out this guy's a double murderer.
It's chilling. Makes you wonder what really lurks beneath the surface.
It does. It's like that encounter, along with these vivid nightmares that Peterson describes,
hmm
really pushed him to understand this darker side of human nature. He realized that to truly understand belief,
Yeah.
you have to understand the capacity for evil that exists within us all.
So how do we even begin to grapple with that?
Well, that's where Peterson introduces this idea of maps of meaning.
Okay.
And you can think of them like mental models, these frameworks that help us understand the world around us.
Okay.
And these maps are shaped by our upbringing, our culture, even our biology.
So they're totally unique to each of us.
Exactly.
So it's like we're all navigating life with these internal maps guiding our decisions
Yes,
and how we interpret the world.
precisely. And these maps help us to find meaning and purpose.
Okay.
But what happens when we encounter something that challenges those existing maps?
Mhm.
Something completely unexpected.
It's like stumbling into uncharted territory.
Yes.
You're relying on your old map, but it's no longer accurate.
Exactly.
It's got to be unsettling.
That's the dance between chaos and order that Peterson talks about.
Okay.
We crave order predictability,
Right.
but it's often those moments of chaos, those disruptions that force us to grow and adapt.
So how does he define those disruptions?
He calls these major shakeups revolutionary novelty.
Revolutionary novelty.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you give me an example?
Okay, so imagine you're going about your day and suddenly you get stuck in a high-rise building
Oh, gosh.
because of a power outage.
Okay.
Your plans, your sense of security, everything is thrown out the window.
Yeah.
That's revolutionary novelty.
Yeah.
It forces you to reassess to find a new way forward.
You're forced to redraw your mental maps entirely.
Exactly. And to help illustrate these very human experiences,
Mhm.
Peterson brings in something kind of unexpected, ancient myths and stories.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so you shared an excerpt about how our brains are hardwired for storytelling.
Yeah.
It's like we use narratives to make sense of not just what happens, but why it happens,
Exactly.
especially when it comes to emotions, values, heroic actions.
Myths aren't just fanciful tales, they actually reflect something much deeper about the human experience.
Okay.
Take the Babylonian creation story, the Enuma Elish, or the Egyptian myth of Osiris.
Mm-hmm.
They're both attempts to understand the unknown, to bring order to chaos. What stood out to you about those stories?
Well, the hero, every story seems to have one.
Right.
That figure who confronts the chaos, battles through it, and ultimately offers some way out,
Yeah.
like a symbol of hope.
Precisely. Figures like Marduk in the Babylonian myth or Horus in the Egyptian tradition,
Mhm.
they tap into this deep-seated human need for someone who can challenge the status quo.
Shake things up.
Yes, shake things up and lead us towards growth.
It's like those heroes remind us that we have that potential too,
Right.
to face our own dragons, be the ones to make a positive change.
Absolutely. But Peterson reminds us that recognizing our potential for good
Yeah.
also means acknowledging that flip side, that potential for evil,
Well, I like that.
for giving in to these harmful ideologies. And that's where things get really interesting.
Yeah, you're right. It's like we can't just focus on the hero's journey.
Right.
We also have to acknowledge that potential for darkness that exists within each of us.
Exactly. And you highlight in an excerpt where Peterson actually talks about catching himself, blaming others for his own frustrations, and he realized that kind of thinking that outward blame,
Mm-hmm.
it's a slippery slope.
It makes you think about how easily we can fall into those traps,
Yeah.
blaming others instead of
Right.
taking responsibility for our own actions.
He even draws parallels to much larger, much scarier scenarios.
Yeah.
Think about some of the atrocities of history, the Holocaust, totalitarian regimes.
Mm.
It's a stark reminder of where that kind of thinking can lead if it's left unchecked.
Yeah, it's a lot to grapple with,
It is.
but it feels important.
Yeah.
Like we can't just ignore it.
Absolutely. And Peterson pushes us further. He challenges us to examine not just individual actions,
Yeah.
but entire systems that operate on these flawed principles.
Okay.
Systems that prioritize blind obedience over individual thought.
You shared an excerpt about how people often find comfort in conformity,
Right.
even if the system they're conforming to is oppressive.
Right.
Why would anyone choose that?
Well, think about it. The known, even if it's flawed or restrictive,
Okay.
can feel safer than the unknown.
Right.
Clinging to a rigid set of beliefs, even harmful ones, it provides a sense of order
Okay.
in a world that often feels very chaotic. It's easier than facing that uncertainty of forging your own path.
But then Peterson introduces this counterpoint, the idea of the honest fool.
Yes.
It seems paradoxical, but I think I get it.
Right. It's the hero archetype again.
Ah.
But this time they're challenging the very foundations
Interesting.
of the system itself. They're willing to risk rejection, even persecution,
Wow.
in pursuit of truth and a greater good.
They're questioning the map that everyone else is using.
Yes.
Saying, hey, what if we're headed in the wrong direction?
Exactly. It takes immense courage to stand apart and say, I see things differently.
It does.
But that's often where real growth, both individually and collectively, stems from.
It reminds me of the story of Moses.
Oh, yeah.
He had to leave everything he knew, venture out into this unknown desert
Right.
to receive the revelation that would ultimately liberate his people.
Right.
Talk about a revolutionary journey.
It's a powerful metaphor for personal and societal transformation. Sometimes we have to leave behind what's familiar.
Yeah.
Risk everything to discover our true purpose and enact meaningful change.
Okay, buckle up, because in one of these excerpts you sent, Peterson takes us on a wild ride
Okay.
with Dostoevsky's The Grand Inquisitor.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
This story is a punch in the gut. Imagine Christ returns to Earth, only to be condemned by the very institution built in his name.
I know, it's wild. Talk about revolutionary novelty.
It's like a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
It's so easy for institutions, even those founded on good intentions,
Right.
to become corrupted by power.
The Inquisitor, so focused on controlling every aspect of faith and maintaining order,
Yeah.
loses sight of the very essence of Christ's teachings, compassion and individual freedom.
It's a scary thought.
It is, isn't it?
You see it play out in different ways throughout history.
All the time.
Institutions losing their way, forgetting their original purpose.
Exactly. And Peterson connects this to the story of Christ and the Pharisees.
Okay.
Remember when Christ challenged their rigid interpretations of religious law? He was highlighting the danger of valuing dogma over the deeper meaning, the spirit of the law.
It's like he's urging us to question blindly following any rule book.
Yes.
To always be asking ourselves, what is the underlying purpose here?
Right.
Is this rule truly serving its intended purpose?
Precisely. And speaking of questioning established systems, Peterson takes us on another detour this time into the world of alchemy.
Okay, this seemed like a strange leap at first.
Yeah.
But the more I read,
Yeah.
the more I understood what he was getting at.
Interesting.
You highlighted a part about alchemists seeing themselves as midwives to nature, helping to unlock its potential.
It's an interesting metaphor, isn't it?
It is. It's like the alchemist, the hero in our own lives, is willing to explore, experiment, even risk failure to bring about transformation.
To uncover that hidden potential.
Yes, and it's not just about personal transformation.
Hmm.
Peterson draws a line to the development of modern science.
He does.
He talks about Isaac Newton, a giant of science who was also fascinated by alchemy.
Right.
It's amazing.
While alchemists may not have had all the answers or the scientific method as we know it,
Right.
their pursuit of transformation, their experimentation, it laid the groundwork
Interesting.
for a more empirical approach to understanding the world.
It's like their relentless curiosity, even if considered misguided by some, really pushed the boundaries of human knowledge.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this brings us back to that internal process of transformation, that yearning for gold within each of us.
Right.
And Peterson argues that it's still relevant today, though not in a literal sense.
So it's not about actually turning lead into gold.
Right.
but about refining ourselves,
Yes.
confronting our limitations, and striving for something greater within.
Exactly. He's talking about individuation becoming a fully realized, unique individual.
Okay.
And that involves facing those less appealing aspects of ourselves, that
Yeah.
shadow that we often try to hide.
Doesn't sound easy.
It's not.
Yeah.
But as Peterson suggests, real growth rarely is.
True.
He argues that acknowledging and integrating those shadow elements, those parts of ourselves we might not like,
Yeah.
it's essential for growth. It's about bringing them into the light, so to speak.
It's like he's saying the more you try to deny those darker impulses,
Yes,
the more likely they are to control you in unhealthy ways.
exactly.
Facing them head on is the only way to move forward.
Precisely. And he connects this to the importance of finding meaning and purpose in life. Because without that sense of direction, it's easy to become lost,
Yeah.
to give in to negativity, even destructive behaviors.
It's like having that guiding light, a sense of purpose,
Yes.
helps illuminate those darker spaces within ourselves so we don't get lost in them.
Exactly. You shared a quote where Peterson talks about pursuing genuine interests
Yes.
as an antidote to nihilism and despair.
Finding something that truly excites you, that makes you want to get out of bed in the morning,
Yeah.
that can be incredibly powerful. It's like those interests, those passions,
Right.
help us find value and meaning even when we're surrounded by suffering.
And it can inspire us to take action to contribute something positive to the world.
It's like those midwives who defied the Pharaoh,
Oh, yeah.
risking their own lives to save the Hebrew baby boys.
Imagine the courage that took.
I know.
They were risking everything.
They chose to act to make a difference, even when it was terrifying.
That's powerful.
It is. And it connects back to that heroic archetype we keep coming back to.
Yes.
That courage to stand up for what's right, even when it's dangerous.
Exactly. It's that moral courage, that willingness to speak truth to power.
Yeah.
That's essential for a healthy society.
It's a good reminder for all of us.
Yeah.
We all have a responsibility to challenge systems and beliefs that are causing harm.
Yes.
We can't just sit back and hope that someone else will do it.
And it doesn't always have to be these grand heroic acts.
Right.
Peterson also emphasizes the importance of everyday choices.
Okay.
The small acts of kindness, those little moments of courage, they matter too.
It's like he's saying, don't underestimate the power of those seemingly insignificant decisions.
Yeah.
They have a ripple effect.
Precisely. He ties this to self-improvement, emphasizing that the small incremental changes we make in our own lives,
Yeah.
those little victories over our weaknesses, they ultimately contribute to a more fulfilling existence.
It's like by bettering ourselves, we're contributing to a better world.
Absolutely.
Right?
It's that ripple effect in action, and it all circles back to confronting that darkness within,
Wow.
recognizing that we all have the capacity for both good and evil. It reminds me of that chilling story Peterson shared about the prisoner he encountered,
Oh, yeah.
the one who seemed so unassuming on the surface but had committed those horrific murders.
Right. It's a stark reminder that evil doesn't always announce itself.
Right.
It often hides in plain sight.
And that's where understanding that shadow becomes so crucial.
Yep.
We often focus on recognizing the potential for darkness in others,
Right.
but Peterson challenges us to turn that lens inward.
Okay.
It's about confronting those aspects within ourselves that we'd rather not acknowledge.
Those hidden parts of ourselves that we might even be afraid to admit exist.
Exactly. And here's the thing. Peterson argues that by acknowledging and accepting those shadow elements,
Okay.
we can actually prevent them from controlling us, from driving us to make destructive choices. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater.
Oh.
The more you fight it, the more forcefully it's going to explode to the surface.
So it's not about pretending those darker impulses don't exist,
Right.
but about understanding them, integrating them into our sense of self so they don't control us.
Precisely. And he links this to the importance of finding meaning and purpose in life. Because when we feel lost, adrift, without direction, we become more vulnerable to those negative impulses.
Yeah.
It creates a void that's easily filled with destructive behaviors or despair.
Like having that guiding light, a sense of purpose,
Yeah.
helps illuminate those darker corners within ourselves
Yeah,
so we don't get lost in them.
exactly. You highlighted an excerpt where Peterson talks about how finding and pursuing genuine interests can be a powerful antidote to that sense of nihilism and despair.
Yeah, it's like finding that thing, that passion or purpose that makes you feel truly alive,
Right.
that gives you a reason to get up in the morning and keep striving.
Precisely. Those passions, those things that genuinely excite us, they can fuel us even in the face of hardship.
It's about finding those sparks of meaning and letting them guide us.
And then when we have that inner compass, We're more likely to make courageous choices, even when they're difficult. It's like those midwives who defied the Pharaoh's orders to kill the Hebrew baby boys.
Right.
Imagine the courage that took. They were risking everything.
They chose to follow their conscience, their sense of what was right, even when it meant defying authority. They
Exactly.
clung to their own internal map, even when it differed from everyone else's.
Exactly. It's a powerful testament to the potential for good that exists within each of us. And Peterson argues that this kind of moral courage is essential for a healthy, thriving society.
It's a good reminder for all of us. We
Yeah.
all have a responsibility to speak truth to power, to challenge injustice, to make those courageous choices no matter how small they might seem.
Absolutely. And sometimes those small acts of courage, those seemingly insignificant choices to do the right thing, those are the seeds of real change.
So after this deep dive into Peterson's work,
Yeah.
where do we go from here? What does it all mean for us in our everyday lives?
I think Peterson leaves us with a powerful message about personal responsibility and the potential for growth. He challenges us to confront the unknown, both within ourselves and in the world around us,
Yeah.
to acknowledge our capacity for both good and evil, to question our beliefs, and to be open to new ways of seeing the world, but most importantly, to act.
To find those things that ignite our passions, that give us a sense of purpose, and then pursue them with everything we've got.
Yes.
Because in those pursuits, we might just find our own heroic journey unfolding.
Beautifully said. This deep dive into Jordan Peterson's maps of meaning has been a profound exploration of the human experience, wouldn't you say? And remember, the journey doesn't end here. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep striving to create a world that reflects your own internal map of meaning.